Imagine this. The holiest palace in Christendom, the Vatican, lit not by prayer candles but by the glow of 1,000 torches. Music fills the air, not hymns, but the sound of lutes and laughter. And in the middle of it all sits a pope. Not in prayer, not in meditation, but surrounded by women, wine, and scandal. This was the world of Pope Alexander VI, the man history remembers as the most corrupt of all pontiffs. When Rodrigo Borgia became pope in 1492, rumors began immediately. But it wasn't whispers of holiness or visions of saints. It was whispers of feasts that turned into orgies, of cardinals competing in games of lust, and of women paraded like prizes inside the Vatican itself. Chroniclers of the time tell us about the infamous banquet of chestnuts. 50 courtesans danced for cardinals and nobles, crawling on the floor to pick up roasted chestnuts while the Pope and his son, Cesare Borgia, watched with delight. Gifts of jewels and fine robes were promised to those who entertained the men best. This was not gossip invented centuries later. Multiple sources from Rome describe the shocking decadence. While peasants starved outside the Vatican walls, the leader of Christendom drank, laughed, and indulged. The papal palace was not only a center of religion, it became, for a time, the most scandalous pleasure house in Europe. But Alexander VI's sins went far beyond orgies. He was accused of nepotism, placing his illegitimate children in positions of power. His daughter, Lucrezia Borgia, was given political marriages as if she were a pawn on a chessboard. His son, Cesare, was made a cardinal at a young age, then unleashed as a ruthless military commander, carving territory for the family dynasty. There were also whispers of poison. Enemies of the Borgias had a strange habit of dying suddenly, often after sharing a meal or a cup of wine. Some even claimed the Pope kept a special ring with a hidden compartment for deadly powder, a weapon of choice in political dinners. And yet, despite these sins, Rodrigo Borgia ruled as Pope for more than a decade. How could a man accused of such corruption hold the highest spiritual office in Europe? How did orgies, poison, and greed exist side by side with prayer, cathedrals, and faith? The answer lies in the strange mix of power and fear that defined the late 15th century. The Borgias were not just a family. They were a dynasty of ambition, pulling strings in politics, war, and the church itself. And the Vatican, meant to be the house of God, became their fortress of desire. But this is just the beginning. To understand the full scandal of Pope Alexander VI, we must go beyond the feasts and the women. We must look at the way he twisted the church itself into a tool for family power. From bribing his way into the papacy to using his own children as weapons, Alexander VI reshaped Rome in his image. If the orgies and scandals of Pope Alexander VI shocked Europe, his nepotism shook the very foundation of the church. To Rodrigo Borgia, the Vatican was not just the house of God, it was the family business. From the moment he secured the papal throne in 1492, he set about placing his blood everywhere. Unlike most popes, Alexander did not hide his illegitimate children. He openly acknowledged them, showered them with wealth, and used them as pieces on his chessboard of power. His most famous son, Cesare Borgia, was just a teenager when he was appointed as a bishop. By the age of 18, he was made a cardinal, one of the highest offices in the church. Not because of faith, not because of wisdom, but because he was the Pope's son. And yet, Cesare was never truly interested in religion. He wanted power, armies, and land. Alexander saw that ambition and later released Cesare from the church so he could become a ruthless military commander. With his father's blessing, Cesare carved out territory across central Italy, using both diplomacy and brutal force. Chroniclers compared him to a lion, handsome, brilliant, but terrifying. And then there was Lucrezia Borgia, Rodrigo's daughter. She was young, intelligent, and beautiful, but she became a pawn in her father's political games. Alexander arranged her marriages not for love, but to secure alliances. First to noble families in Spain, then to powerful Italian houses. Rumors swirled that she carried secrets for her father, even that she might have been used as bait in dangerous plots. Whether true or not, the gossip about Lucrezia's role only added to the family's scandalous reputation. Nepotism did not stop with his children. Relatives of the Borgias were placed into key roles across Italy. Cousins, nephews, and allies suddenly found themselves bishops, cardinals, and governors. The papal states, which were supposed to belong to the church, looked more like the private estate of the Borgia clan. Money flowed like water. Alexander VI was accused of selling church offices, taking bribes to appoint bishops and cardinals loyal only to him. It was said that no decision in Rome could be made without the Borgias taking their cut. The papacy itself became, in the eyes of many, a marketplace of power. This was a dangerous game. The church was supposed to be the moral compass of Europe. Instead, it was turning into a dynasty where family ties mattered more than faith. Critics called Alexander a merchant of souls. Satirical poems in Rome mocked the Pope for caring more about gold and bloodlines than salvation. And yet, the Borgias were not weak. With Cesare commanding armies and Lucrezia forging alliances through marriage, the family became untouchable. Kings and princes feared them. Even enemies admitted that Cesare was one of the most capable military leaders of his time. Some would later inspire Machiavelli's The Prince, the infamous guide to ruthless politics, directly from Cesare's actions. For over a decade, the Borgias tightened their grip. Alexander was the Pope, Cesare was the sword, and Lucrezia was the diplomatic face. Together, they bent Italy to their will. But behind the masks of elegance and power lurked darker truths. Whispers of poison, secret murders, and ruthless betrayals. The next chapter of this scandalous story takes us deeper into the shadows, where the Borgias turned Rome not only into a palace of lust, but into a palace of fear. By now, Europe already whispered of Pope Alexander VI as a man of greed and power. But what truly burned his name into infamy were the stories of orgies and shameless scandals inside the Vatican itself. The most infamous of all was the Banquet of Chestnuts, held in October 1501. Contemporary accounts describe a shocking scene. 50 courtesans invited to the papal palace, dining with cardinals, nobles, and even the Pope's son, Cesare Borgia. After the feast, the women danced before the men, then crawled on all fours to collect roasted chestnuts scattered across the marble floor by candlelight. What followed, according to chroniclers, was a contest of lust, with prizes of fine clothes and jewels given to the most talented participants. This was not rumor whispered centuries later. Johann Burchard, the Pope's own master of ceremonies, wrote about it in his diary. That detail, coming from an official insider, made the scandal impossible to dismiss as simple slander. Imagine. While the people of Rome prayed for salvation, their Pope presided over a spectacle of decadence. And this was not a one-time event. Accounts from Rome tell us of constant feasts, orgies, and celebrations in the papal chambers. Nobles and cardinals attended not to debate theology, but to indulge in wine, women, and intrigue. The Vatican, the holiest place in the Catholic world, had become in the eyes of many Romans a palace of lust. Rumors swirled around Lucrezia Borgia as well. Some claimed she served as hostess of these events, pouring wine and entertaining guests, while others accused her of darker roles. Although many of these claims were exaggerated by enemies, they spread like wildfire. For Rome's citizens, the Pope's family was no longer just powerful. They were dangerously scandalous. The hypocrisy was staggering. The same church that punished commoners for sins of the flesh tolerated and even celebrated lust at its highest levels. Priests thundered against immorality from their pulpits, while their leader feasted in ways that shocked even hardened Renaissance nobles. And yet, Alexander VI did not lose control. Instead, his scandals seemed to make him stronger. Fear, gold, and military power kept critics silent. Those who opposed him too openly often found themselves ruined, imprisoned, or mysteriously dead. It was said that even enemies who entered the Pope's banquets sometimes never returned, fueling the rumors of poison and secret plots. The Vatican during Alexander's reign became a symbol of contradiction. Towering cathedrals on the outside, shameless indulgence on the inside. Foreign ambassadors reported back to their kings with astonishment, some calling Rome the New Babylon. And still, Europe could do little. The Pope was not merely a bishop. He was the spiritual head of millions and the political master of Rome. Even kings feared the wrath of the papacy, and Alexander wielded that fear while indulging in every desire. But lust and feasts were only part of the darkness. Behind the laughter and music lay something even more sinister. Ruthless violence, political betrayal, and whispered murders that stained the Borgia's legacy forever. If the feasts and scandals painted Pope Alexander VI as a man of lust, the stories of violence and murder revealed his darker, more ruthless side. For the Borgias, power was not maintained by prayer or sermons. It was secured by fear, betrayal, and, many believed, poison. One of the most enduring rumors surrounding Alexander VI was his supposed use of poison to eliminate rivals. Chroniclers wrote about a mysterious substance called cantarella, a white powder said to kill quickly and quietly when slipped into wine. Some claimed the Pope kept a special ring with a hidden compartment for this deadly tool, allowing him to poison a guest with just a touch. Whether fact or legend, the mere belief in it was enough to terrify his enemies. Opponents of the Borgias had a curious habit of dying suddenly. Wealthy cardinals, political rivals, and nobles who stood in the family's way sometimes vanished after dining at the papal table. Rome buzzed with whispers that the Pope and his son Cesare were orchestrating silent assassinations disguised as accidents or sudden illnesses. Cesare Borgia, in particular, became the sword of the family. Once released from his role as cardinal, he transformed into a ruthless military commander. With his father's blessing, Cesare waged campaigns across central Italy, conquering towns and crushing opposition. Chroniclers described him as both charismatic and terrifying. Machiavelli himself later praised Cesare's cunning, using him as the model for the prince, a manual of ruthless politics. Violence also reached inside the Borgia family itself. The sudden death of Alexander's son, Juan Borgia, in 1497 shocked Rome. His body was found in the Tiber River, stabbed multiple times. Rumors immediately pointed to his brother Cesare as the likely killer, motivated by jealousy and ambition. The Pope mourned deeply, but the crime was never solved, leaving a permanent shadow over the Borgias. Even Lucrezia, Alexander's daughter, was not free from the family's bloody intrigues. Her marriages were often arranged for political gain, and when alliances soured, her husbands sometimes met tragic fates. Whether or not she played an active role, her name became entangled in tales of poison, betrayal, and death. The Vatican itself was no sanctuary from violence. During Alexander's reign, it became a fortress where politics and danger walked hand in hand. Diplomats described an atmosphere of constant suspicion, where even allies feared being eliminated if they lost favor. For Rome's citizens, the Pope's palace became less the house of God and more a house of shadows. The Borgias' lust for power, fueled by gold and ambition, left behind a trail of corpses and terrified whispers. And yet, despite the poison rumors, the family murders, and the rivers of blood spilled in Italy, Alexander VI clung to his throne for more than a decade. His reign did not collapse under scandal or violence. Instead, he remained powerful, feared, and secure. But nothing lasts forever. In 1503, a twist of fate brought the Borgia dynasty to its knees. The Pope himself fell victim, some said to poison, others to divine justice. For more than a decade, Pope Alexander VI had ruled through lust, gold, and fear. But in 1503, fate struck the Borgias in the most ironic way possible. The man accused of poisoning so many may himself have been poisoned. It began during a hot Roman summer. Alexander VI and his son Cesare were invited to a banquet by a wealthy cardinal. Some sources claim the Pope had prepared poison in advance, intending to eliminate his host and seize his property. But according to the story, the plan backfired. The poison wine was served by mistake to Alexander and Cesare themselves. The Pope fell violently ill. Chroniclers describe him sweating, vomiting, his skin turning dark as fever consumed him. Cesare also became sick, though he eventually recovered. Alexander, however, did not. After days of agony, the most infamous pope in history died on August 18, 1503. His death shocked Rome. Rumors spread instantly. Was it divine punishment? Was it an accident of his own making? Or had his enemies finally struck back? No one knew for certain, but many believed it was poetic justice, the poisoner undone by poison. The aftermath was chaos. Cesare, weakened and bedridden from illness, could not secure his father's legacy. The Borgia dream of a family dynasty collapsed almost overnight. Enemies who had once feared them now rose to reclaim power. Cardinals whispered in back rooms, eager to erase the stain of Alexander's reign. Even the Pope's burial became a scandal. His corpse, swollen and discolored, was said to have been stuffed into a coffin too small, forcing attendants to press the body inside with sticks. The sight horrified onlookers and became a symbol of his excesses. A man too large for even his own grave, Cesare tried to hold on. He still commanded armies and had ambitions of carving out a kingdom in central Italy. But without his father on the papal throne, he lacked the political shield he once enjoyed. Former allies turned against him. Within a few years, Cesare was captured in Spain and later killed in battle in 1507. The once mighty sword of the Borgias lay broken. Lucrezia's story ended differently. She escaped the chaos by retreating into respectability. Married into the Este family of Ferrara, she became a duchess and a patron of the arts. Yet even in her later years, whispers of poison and scandal clung to her name. The fall of the Borgias was as dramatic as their rise. From the heights of power in Rome to the disgrace of scandal, their dynasty burned bright and fast, leaving behind a legacy of fear and fascination. And yet, even in death, Alexander VI's name did not fade. For centuries, he has remained a symbol of corruption, excess, and the dangerous union of faith and unchecked ambition. But his story doesn't end with a coffin in Rome. It echoes into history, shaping the way people think about power, morality, and the price of unchecked desire. The death of Pope Alexander VI in 1503 did not erase his shadow. If anything, it carved his name permanently into history as the most scandalous pope of all time. His reign left behind more than whispers of lust and poison. It changed how people viewed the Church itself. For centuries, the papacy had claimed to be the moral compass of Europe. But under Alexander, that illusion cracked. His open nepotism, his orgies, his suspected murders, all of it revealed that the Vatican could be as corrupt and power-hungry as any royal court. The shock of his scandals became a turning point. Many historians argue that the excesses of the Borgias planted seeds of doubt that would later explode in the Protestant Reformation. When Martin Luther nailed his theses in 1517, one of his loudest complaints was the corruption of Rome, corruption that Alexander VI had embodied to perfection. Writers and thinkers of the Renaissance also took notice. Niccolò Machiavelli, observing Cesare Borgia, found in him the perfect example of ruthless leadership. In The Prince, Machiavelli praised Cesare's cunning, his ability to inspire fear, and his cold pragmatism. And behind Cesare stood Alexander, the father who gave him power. In this way, the Borgias shaped not only politics but also the very philosophy of power. Even in art and literature, the name Borgia became a symbol. Playwrights, novelists, and later filmmakers turned Alexander VI into the archetype of corruption. From Victor Hugo to modern television series, the Borgias remain one of the most infamous families of Europe, seductive, dangerous, and unforgettable. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Alexander VI lies in the contradictions he embodied. He was both a man of faith and a man of lust, a pope who built churches while hosting orgies, a father who loved his children while using them as pawns, a ruler who claimed to defend Christendom while poisoning its trust. He was not just a corrupt leader. He was a mirror of his age, the Renaissance at its brightest and darkest. For Rome's citizens, his reign became a legend of warning. Tales of the banquet of chestnuts, of poisoned chalices, of the swollen corpse forced into a coffin too small. These became stories passed down for generations, reminders of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Today, when we look back at Alexander VI, we do not see a spiritual guide. We see the collision of power, greed, and desire at the very heart of the Church. We see how one man and his family turned the Vatican into both a fortress of faith and a palace of scandal. And that is why Pope Alexander VI remains unforgettable. Not because he saved souls, but because he nearly sold them, proving that even in the holiest halls of Europe, corruption could wear the crown of holiness.